All right. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome to the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting. Lovely to see everybody here. I'll start with the opening karakia. Tū taua mai I runga, tū taua mai I raro, tū taua mai I waho, tū taua mai I roto. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora ki te katoa, haume ai, hui ai, taiki ai. Kia ora. Do we have any apologies for the meeting? No? No apologies, so we'll keep...
Sorry, just that I need to leave at 2:45.
3. Okay, noted. That's noted. Thanks, Kate. Does anybody have any declarations of interest in relation to anything on the agenda?
I've
Mike?
got a conflict of interest that I should declare.
Right.
I've become a member of the Central Hawke's Bay District Council, District Council Audit and Risk Committee. I don't know if you interact with those people, but yeah, there could be something in there.
Thank you for that. Thanks for that declaration. It's noted. Yeah. Anybody else? No. Thank you. Now I'd just like to put the motion that we accept the late item, the audit of the Whanganui District Council's 2024 annual report. The item wasn't originally included in the agenda but arrived late from Audit New Zealand, so we want to get it on the agenda. So what I'm putting is that this item, I've just said that, that we accept the item 6.1, the audit of Whanganui District Council's 2024 annual report. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Josh. All those in favour? Against? Welcome, Michael. Nobody against? That's carried. Thank you. We're going to slot that in at after item 5.4 on the agenda. Okay, confirmation of the minutes of the 2nd of May. Anybody got any points, questions or clarification on the minutes? It's good. Thank you, Kate, and I'm happy to second. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. All right, now the first item on the agenda today is the Asset Management Project update. I'd like to welcome Sarah to the table and Stuart. Hi, Stuart. We've been aware for some time it's been a big lot of work going on around asset management in the council, and it was just really timely to have this update. The other thing is that as you've had a look at the papers, you'll note that the asset management and the criticality of the assets is actually very much part of the next stage of our insurance approach. And so we've put the asset management overarching project up front to hear about that project and ask questions about that project to understand it better. And then we'll move into the second stage of our strategic approach to insurance that we approved last meeting. So we're going to go and have your presentation, and then we'll open up for questions and any comments at that point. So over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. So just before I hand over to Stuart, who is project managing this piece of work, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context for the Risk and Assurance Committee. So as the Chair has summarised, this is a summary of where we're at with the approach that we're taking to improve our management of our data and information with respect to our assets, in particular our vertical assets. So vertical assets, in other words, are the bricks and mortar assets around town, as opposed to the horizontal assets, which are the roading assets and the 3 water assets. So this piece of work is focusing on the people, processes and procedural improvements that we need to make internally so that we can move to a far more mature model where we're operating those vertical assets with a whole lot more robust data and information. We have the right capability in the team, and we are positioned to get better value out of those assets based on the information and data that we hold across that portfolio. As the Chair alluded to, we have had a risk in this space for some time because of the way in which we've held or not held, as the case may be, data and information relating to our assets. So I'm really pleased that we've got this project underway. It's been a wee while in the making to put us in a much stronger position moving forward. So now I think that's enough from me. Stuart will take us through the approach, how we've structured it internally, so that we can make the changes and they stick, so that we're in a better position moving forward. Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for this opportunity to go through the project. Every good project starts with a problem that we're trying to solve, so the genesis for this has probably been quite long-standing, but there was an internal review in 2022 which highlighted a number of issues that mainly centre around the availability of data in this space, particularly in respect of the vertical assets that we're talking about here, so those leisure facilities, community buildings, venues, airport facilities, all of those types of buildings.
Stuart, I've just been asked, could you just push your microphone closer towards you, please?
Sure, okay.
Thank you.
How's that? That's better, isn't it? Yeah, thank you. And I guess also just a lack of cohesive procedures and processes around this. So, not significant alignment around the progress of an asset through its life cycle, and probably quite a concentration on reacting to the maintenance requirements of the assets that make up this portfolio. We've already talked about the risk that's a strategic risk for the organisation, and one of the underlying components of that is that we don't really have good, solid, consistent asset management plans on which to base annual plans and long-term plans. So the overall goal of this project is really to fill the gap between where we are currently and a future that is much more aligned to best practice in asset management. Okay, next slide. Yep. We've been through a traditional project approach to this, and early on we looked at what is the current state, just to really get a sense of what we need to retain into the future and what really needs to be changed so that we follow good practice. And one of the key features of the current model that operates in this space is that it's very much focused on reactive maintenance. And to the extent that 50% of investment is going into that area, 80% of staff time, and you really need to see quite a flip in that to around 20% of effort into reactive and the rest into planned. Next slide. So we stood up a project to manage these outcomes in December last year. It's got a governance board, project board made up of Sarah as sponsor, the owners of the system, Rosemary and Tanya Hanari, finance representation, ICT, and we have a project team of 2 part-timers and 2 full-timers that are working our way through this at the moment. So I'll talk a little bit more about the elements of that shortly. Next slide. This is in splendid alignment with the Whanganui District Council's organisational strategy. One of the key strategic outcomes is supporting long-term planning and asset optimisation. And the project is aiming to achieve by December this year all this policies, procedures, systems and and people to support step change in end-to-end asset management. So at this stage, we're more than halfway through that project. Next one is just what are we aiming for the system to look like at the end, and it really is covering off all those aspects of better data, the people with the roles and responsibilities and training and development to support this better, the processes and procedures to work through so it's well controlled, and the system to support it, so a technology solution that will optimise the journey of an asset through its life cycle and maintain a really strong asset register. So this is really strategically aligning the asset portfolio of the council along with decision making and investment decisions. Just in terms of how we're viewing the risk, we're monitoring, we've got a risk register monitoring about 21 risks for the project. A number of them fall into two key areas. One is the staff resistance to change. There's a methodology in place that's been working for a number of years. There's a database that is nearly, or it's probably over 20 years old, that's being used to inform this. Not all of that is negative, but we do require a step change in the way that staff operate in this space so that we get better outcomes from those important community assets. The second area that sits high in our risk register is the vendor delivery challenges, and most of you are aware of the high risks around software development, making getting absolute clarity about what the requirements are and aligning that with what a vendor delivers for a price, and avoiding significant slippage in both cost and time as a result of that. So we're working through quite a comprehensive procurement process to secure a solution that will manage these above ground assets. The key work streams for the project is sort of bookended by project management type approaches, the project management work stream and the embedding change and continuous improvement, but the core work streams are really data standardisation, getting absolute verification of the assets that are held by the council and the components that make up those assets. The processes and procedures to follow for the teams that are directly associated with these assets, but also the other parts of the organisation that interact with the asset management system, finance, customer management and GIS, just to name the key ones. The people is, have we got the right roles, responsibilities, capabilities? And information management is the work stream that's really geared around securing a solution that will support mature and modern asset management. Excellent. Progress. The project is running on time to quite an aggressive timeline. Was initiated in December last year. Developed a roadmap in January, worked through current state, future state and gap analysis. We've then been working through the stages of a procurement process for a vendor to provide a solution, and with a lot of work to secure a vendor who can start in September this year, so that's been signalled as far back as April. We have been fairly successful in attracting some vendors to put forward their offerings. The process is yielded a total of 8 responses, and we're currently in a negotiation phase with a view to settling a contract within about the next month. The project also developed a criticality framework, which, as the Chair mentioned, is feeding into the insurance proposals as well. And we have also been in the market recently for a supplier to provide condition assessments on our most critical assets in this portfolio. So there are, we're starting off with, I think we identified about 147 in total that we assessed for criticality, and we're proceeding with 40 of those, the most critical, probably the highest value assets of the council. We're proceeding with those to secure a provider to establish really a base level of the condition of those assets. And throughout there's processes and procedures work, data standardisation, and the project close in December. Now that is very subject to performance of the vendor. This is a very short time frame to implement something like this, but we've got indications that it's possible, so we're working strenuously to meet those deadlines. One of the key components of the people work stream is managing change. This is quite a significant change, not just for the team that's involved in managing assets in the vertical space, but also it does impact on other parts of the organisation. So it's an approach that changes the way much of this organisation will work. And just to go back to one of the foundation pieces of work we did in the project was actually to put in place an asset management policy for the council. So that's providing some guiding principles and objectives, not only for this project to work on, but asset management per se across the council. And the last slide is next steps. I've covered those really through the presentation. Our ultimate goal is to achieve a substantial advance in asset maturity, build a team that's capable of working in new ways and working with evidence, being able to make decisions that ultimately provide community benefit.
Great, thank you very much, Stuart, for that overview. And thanks for your work on the project. Questions? So I've got Councillor Josh.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Stuart. Just a question of clarification around the international standard that's mentioned in the report. The report refers to a requirement to comply. I wonder if that's just a word that's been used for the purposes of the report, or whether there is anything that local government in New Zealand has agreed to work towards that standard, or is this just best practice?
Yeah, this is best practice. Okay. Yeah, we don't have a requirement to comply. What the approach we're taking in the project is to align this system with ISO 55000. Yeah.
And what's the name of the regulatory body or whatever you call it that determines the standard?
It's part of the international standards, so I'm not quite sure exactly where they're generated. David will. Yeah.
ISO's International Standards Organisation. Okay. So that's their name. They're the governing body over setting the standards, and then they administer and oversee the certification process, if you want to go to that far to actually become certified. If I could add a little bit to Stuart's response around your first question, Council's core business is owning assets. We've got over $1 billion of assets, so having an asset management system that is aligned to best practice is certainly, from my point of view, it's a no-brainer. It should be one of the things that we're the best at because of the amount of assets we own. So there's no legal requirement for it, and I believe that there's currently no local or central government agency that has certification for the asset management standard. So we are kind of, I suppose, attempting to lead the way a little bit with this as well.
Just on that point, David, is there any indication from anywhere within the political sphere or LGNZ that it could become a regulated aspect of what we do?
Through you, not that I'm aware of around it becoming regulated or required, but certainly the sector as a whole is waking up to asset management and its importance to achieving our core purpose. So through the Three Waters reform and a lot of the investment that goes into our roading networks, many councils are starting to look at how do they mature their asset management capabilities.
Thank you. Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. A couple of questions. The first one is applaud the project. Sounds like, I had the word no-brainer in my mind as well, about time. The question for me is around age of our assets. I don't know what the root cause of the reactive maintenance is, but I imagine we've got ageing assets, and because of that, there's more maintenance required. Whilst the project is going on, we obviously need to address maintenance at the same time. So when would we catch up to flipping it so it's kind of 80-20 rather than 20-80?
Before I answer the when will we catch up question, just to sort of expand on your school of thought there, what we're doing in the meantime while the project is underway is something different. So I wanted to be really clear that we needed to make a break, so to speak, and make some immediate changes. So what we've put in place for this financial year, or the first half of this financial year, is a prioritisation matrix that will, and we've got a bucket of reactive maintenance funding. So we'll have a little bit like what we did with prioritising our point of entry business cases. We'll have a list of work that we need to do. That's all prioritised based on the framework, and then we've got so much money that we have got to spend on that list of prioritised work. That is a fundamental shift in how we've been managing our maintenance program before the start of this month. We were without the condition assessments, we were kind of just lurching through no sort of particular reason, lurching from one responsive activity to the next. So we've taken some extra disciplines this year, put in a framework, prioritised based on the outputs of that prioritisation framework, and then planned our work accordingly. We will revisit that on a monthly basis throughout the year because things change. New priorities will come on stream, and old priorities, other priorities will potentially come off stream. So that's a deliberate change for this year. It's a small step towards the new environment where we have condition assessments that inform all of our spend.
Right. No, good answer. Thank you. So second question, if I may, my last question, is around, this is obviously just for vertical assets, I'm thinking around horizontal assets as well. And I don't know, I'm not an engineer and don't have had that kind of background, but is there any integration and learnings or crossover between horizontal and vertical asset management practices and systems and processes?
Yes, there are crossovers, and there are learnings that this project is taking and will continue to take once the project is wound up from our horizontal asset management capability. There are definite efficiencies that we can gain across the organisation with respect to all of our assets if we consider how we manage that capability and capacity slightly differently than we are now. So this is sort of I wouldn't say the first step, it is a step towards that.
Right, no, thank you, that's what I was hoping for. Thank you.
Mike Timmer.
Thank you very much, Sarah and David. That's great. Really, really pleased to hear that this project's coming along. It's been, I think, quite a while in the coming, and I think it'll make great gains for the organisation, moving from a reactive to a proactive, and also it's a very good way of risk mitigation, so you know where to put your money in your expertise. I just wanted to also ask a little bit further in the last question that Andrew had in terms of where does this fit in terms of the other assets we've got, other assets we have, for example, equipment, our roading, as the horizontal assets, and the other assets, can they all run within the same system?
In the fullness of time, they may be able to run in the same system. We don't have a system yet, so we don't quite have the ability to answer that. System by, I mean, technical system. There's another definition of system, the end-to-end system. Absolutely, we should be running all of our assets in the same end-to-end system. And the policy that we've adopted internally is wide enough for all of that to take place in time.
Okay. And I have one more question.
Did David, did you just want to respond to that?
Through you, Madam Chair, I just want to elaborate on what Sarah's just described there, because when we're talking asset management system, we are talking the holistic organisational system of our people, our capabilities, processes, procedures, and the software system. The likelihood is, I believe, we'll never get to the point where we have all of our assets in one software system, because different types of assets have different needs, and we'll be pursuing a best of breed approach. So, for example, our plant and maintenance assets have quite demanding on the reactive and proactive maintenance scheduling. Let's get a software system that does that really, really well. Our roading assets, though, need to stay in our RAM asset database, because that's one of the requirements on us from NZTA. RAM does proactive scheduled maintenance for plant and equipment really poorly, because it was designed for roads, not pumps and the like. So why compromise your plant and equipment assets to shoehorn it into our roading database? So best of breed, but one holistic system to, one ring to rule them all, if I can be a little bit nerdy.
Okay.
Thank you, David. Mike, could you just move your microphone a little closer? Thank you.
Yeah, and just my last question, and I probably should have asked this before we had the meeting, was have you got a timeline? I mean, you said the end of the year, but there's quite a lot of bits in there, and what happens after the consultant's done everything? What happens after that? Have we got a timeline for all of that?
For the embedding piece?
Yeah, so like dates and...
So we've got a whole change program that's kicking off now that will be an enduring change program until we've embedded what we need to embed. That isn't going to go away. The responsibility of that will shift from the project team once the project team winds up to the delivery team or to the service owner, so that's the delivery team, and the business owner, which is Rosemary. So both of those functions sit in my remit. So the work will be an enduring piece of work. It's pretty difficult to put a finer point on timing around embedding change, because it takes time, and you'll take a step forward and then you might take a couple back. As far as the project deliverables go, we haven't missed a beat since we stood up back in December last year. So we are holding our line with respect to the timing that we've set. Stuart alluded to it, we are reaching a bit of a crunch point with our vendor selection, so that may impact the timing. It won't have a significant impact in the timing.
So, and maybe when you give us a next start date on this, you could give us more of a timeline. That would be helpful. Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Councillor Michael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this a significant project? It is, yep. Where is this going to be living?
Yeah.
So it's come to the risk committee. Is it going to live here?
It's come to this committee because of the asset management risk that's associated with it. and I thought it was important. We'd been rather silent, well, I've been rather silent in this committee around how we were managing the risk. I think I spoke to you some time ago and said that we were going to stand up a project, and I haven't given you any information since then.
Cool. So it's going to go to the projects committee next as well.
I don't see that it will go to the projects committee because it's an established project.
Yes, David.
So through you, Madam Chair, I think it's just important to make a little bit of a distinction. Whilst this is a project, it's not a project in the sense of the terms of reference of the that particular projects committee, because it is a project to improve the internal capability of the organisation. It's not there to provide a service or a product to the community. So there is a distinction between the two. Regardless of which committee it goes to, we are committed to making sure you've got good oversight of the progress we're making because of the importance. So whether it continues to come here, operations and performance, or one of the other, whichever committee is the best fit, really.
That's cool. I'll try and keep my questions, Madam Chair, to risk, but I have a lot of questions from technology point of view. Are we going to be process-driven technology, or you have a process-driving technology, or are we going to have technology-driving process? Because you've kind of got both in here. I was wondering, because the risk appetite will be different if we were driving towards best technologically rather than change our processes to match, or we're going to have our processes match technology.
We're well aware of the balance that needs to be achieved between those two. We've put a lot of front-end work into defining what our requirements should be, and that's largely been based on best practice, not what we currently do in the council. So we would expect that a technology solution will broadly match with those requirements, but we certainly are expecting to be able to align the processes and procedures with the software solution as well, to avoid us getting into significant customisation for features that only apply to this council.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yep. You just got, because it mentions policies and procedures that have been changed or in motion of changing. I'm assuming we're not going to do that until we have our vendor locked in and the requirements locked. Otherwise, we've got waste of policies being changed.
No, we're not introducing any new procedures, and this is all happening in tandem with the implementation of a software solution.
Cool.
So once the system goes live, it's the solution supporting the policies and procedures of the organisation and vice versa.
Cool.
If I may, it is my experience that when you adopt a new IT system, it comes last, not first. It is an enabler. It isn't what drives your policies and procedures. You have that to deliver what you need, not the other way round. So that's why we've spent since December to now to get to the stage where we're at to look for a software solution, because we needed to be clear about what it was that we needed. You end up with the tail wagging the dog if you go the other way.
I'll stick to risk questions. With the KPIs, I'm assuming we're going to see a much more in-depth reduction of risks, people risk, privacy risks, data risks, with the new implementation of new software. That's why we're doing it, I'm assuming. So the benefits of the project are very light. So I'm assuming that we're doing this because we're going to reduce risk of data breaches, forecasted problems. Like, why are we doing this?
Why are we doing the risk management? Or
Why are we doing the new software? Yeah.
So good practice for any project is that you have a risk profile across your deliverables and your objectives. Nothing comes without risk. So the risk register as it relates to the project is all about making sure that we can do what we think and need to do and say we're doing in a safe environment.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Can I just ask a question about something, well, a statement that my colleagues just made about the benefits of this project are light, is what I thought I heard.
The documentation is light, yes, on the benefits.
This is just an overview of the
Yeah.
project.
So I was trying to expand on what those metrics are. They would likely be
Right.
reduction of risk, asset performance. You'd have things like productivity gains, people productivity gains, that kind of thing. So I'm
Can I ask, thank you, Michael. Can I just ask David to respond?
Yeah, can we
Yeah.
just tease that out, because it
Yeah.
was, you delivered it as a statement, and I'd like just to understand.
that's fine. Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
So look, the benefits of doing this are, I think, going to be quite extensive. They may be lightly stated in the document, but if you think the asset management system is one of the main tools and systems that we rely on to plan the investment for our renewals programs of our assets. So you are talking, tens of millions of dollars of investment every year, optimizing that spend and making sure we're extracting maximum value from our existing assets before we pay to replace them is key. It's also going to improve the reliability of the services that we provide, because by assessing the criticality of individual assets, we can make sure they're prioritized for replacement, so that we don't get failures that disrupt the services to our community. And then that ratio of reactive maintenance to planned proactive maintenance is something, again, where we can optimize the total cost of owning the assets. Reactive maintenance in of itself isn't a bad thing, particularly where you've got low risk, low criticality assets that you just want to run to failure and really kind of get maximum value out of them before you pay to replace them. Reactive maintenance is fine, but if the ratio is wrong and you're letting critical assets deteriorate to the point where you need to react because they're broken, then you've got a service delivery reliability issue. So optimizing tens of millions of dollars of spend on our assets is why we're doing this.
Yeah.
And the financial gains should be pretty significant.
And that's where I was going with it. Yeah, thank you. Which answers the key questions. Do we have a budget for this project yet?
There's a capital budget that's in the long-term plan of $250,000 for the software solution, and we're covering the rest of the project costs internally.
Can I just add, before we move off the benefit conversation, so everything that David said, as well as when we have a handle at a portfolio level of all of the data and information that feeds into that and feeds out of that, not only will we get the financial benefits and spending the dollar wisely, and less of a dollar potentially, we will also be in a position where we can deliver assets, enduring assets, in a way that the community needs. Because at the moment, because of the reactive way that we're doing it, and in the absence of some key information, we're making some assumptions that there's an enduring requirement for the community, to maintain the asset as it is now. We might choose, and this data and information will give us the ability to make informed decisions, to make different choices about how we manage the portfolio and the community assets moving forward. That we just can't make at the moment because we don't have any of the information, even if we wanted to make them. Yeah.
Totally agree. Yep. I'll leave those ones. And just my last one for risk then is what was our procurement process? We have 8 responses, but what was the process we went through?
Yeah, we've done a multi-stage procurement process, starting with a RFI, registration for interest. And we've set up a full evaluation panel, followed the council's procurement policy and procedures, and as a result of that, we went to a selected tender process with 5 of those respondents, and we've currently notified 2 of those that we wish to negotiate for a contract. So we've still got to make a final decision to select the vendor, but an evaluation panel's been involved right through that. We've had probity oversight throughout as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peter?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. My question is going to be a little light compared to the last ones. When does a vertical or a horizontal asset become a vertical one? As an example, the wastewater treatment plant. Is that a vertical or a horizontal?
Yeah, well, that's an asset that's under the umbrella of the Three Waters assets, but it would be a vertical asset. Yeah, the plant would be a vertical asset. Yeah. So I guess you know, the point of delineation might be complex around open spaces where, you know, essentially a sports ground is more vertical and more horizontal than vertical. But those particular assets are included in this portfolio, which we're broadly labelling as vertical assets.
And then to go back to one of your first slides in the team that you surrounded this, and where in that is the risk and assurance lens? Because they're all quite, you know, the assessment of risk, making sure that it is inbuilt into the new system, is how is that going, where and how is that going to be implemented?
Well, I'll just talk about the project just follows a traditional model where we have a risk register and we are really focused on the risks that apply to the project and its ability to succeed. Perhaps, Sarah, you can talk about the wider risks.
I'm not quite sure I understand where you're going with the question.
Well, for clarification then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in your procedures and policies and that are going to be written in that, the whole point of, you know, it needs to be built in, your risk assessments and that. So how is that risk and assessment lens being built into the system so that it sort of looks after itself rather than, you know, something coming out at the end of it?
I think David's got a response here.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I'll jump in because I think I understand the question that you're asking. So our corporate risk framework has been put together to comply with the ISO 31000 standard, which is the standard for risk management. One of the benefits of using the ISO standards as the guiding standard for how we put together our corporate systems and frameworks is they're all compatible with each other. So one of the key components of the asset management system is a risk management framework. And the fact that the standards all use that common language and common approach means that with the team following the ISO 55000 standard for asset management, if they are well aligned to that, then everything they do will be well aligned to our existing risk management framework, because that was put together under the sister standard. And it would be the same for our health and safety approach if we follow the ISO standard for that. Collaborative business relationships, ISO 48000, for example, all built to be compatible, and they're almost like jigsaw pieces. And if you're compliant with one, it becomes very easy then to collect a suite of them that all talk to each other, and you're compliant across the board. So hopefully that was with the root of your question, but if not,
no, thank you for trying to understand my question, because it's exactly what I was trying to do.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Councillor Kate?
Thank you. I've got a bigger question, I think, but a wee follow on from the answer about the horizontal versus vertical is, if we use the wastewater treatment plant as an example, one is vertical and the wastewater system is horizontal.
David?
I'll jump in here because when we talk horizontal and vertical, we're kind of using colloquial language from the construction sector. So roads, pipes, and the associated assets are usually called the horizontal sector. Buildings are the vertical sector. we're using the layman terms to make it relatively accessible to talk about.
Ooh, careful.
The point I was making is one of the most important artifacts that this project will deliver is a data taxonomy or a metadata standard that then provides a full glossary of terms as to what all of the technical language actually means and which assets fall into which category, so that there is absolute clarity, because I can totally appreciate when we're talking horizontal and vertically, the layperson's interpretation of those words can make it seem confusing, because wastewater treatment plants are buildings and they would intuitively fall in the vertical category, but we would classify them under our taxonomy as horizontal.
Okay, so there are dangers in dumbing things down is the message there. Thank you. My question is about bias and how working through this criticality issue, how do you guard against bias? And I'm thinking about officer bias, I'm thinking about community bias, elected member bias.
That's a great question.
Thank
Kate.
you. Don't dumb the answer down for me, will you?
The criticality assessment that we're referring to, you'll hear a little bit more about in the next item. There are some components associated with that are not disputable. Yeah. So the bias is minimised through that process. One of the features of the criticality assessment, it sort of relates to service. So that's the community, how often they might use an asset, how they use an asset, those sorts of things. So rather than it being potentially problematic, it's an evidence-based discussion around what's actually happening here and now. So how are they using it, not potentially how they think they're using it, for example. But the reality, so with those checks and balances in place, the reality is that there is likely to be some decisions that are taken, or some assessments that are taken out of that framework that could be different. So there would be a sensibility lens that we run across that after we've gone through that assessment and gone, actually, asset X, Y and Z's ended up at the bottom of the food chain. Actually, there's something instinctively not right with that.
Thank you. As you were talking, I was thinking of the likes of the Water Tower or the Jury Hill Tower, which is part of our skyline, and I'm sure a very valued, iconic thing in this community. So is that how you would assess it if it fell to the bottom of the pile, and saying, well,
it would be unlikely to fall to the bottom of the pile in my view, because it's part of the skyline and because of the way in which the community engages with that asset already. But should it fall to the bottom of the pile, then yes, that would be the sorts of situation where we would say, actually, do we want to interfere with our skyline and the history that comes with it, that we actually might make some deliberate decisions in those situations to move that up the list.
Thank you. So just one last question, and that's around, is there some deliberate criteria or decisions applied to cultural significance and importance?
With respect to the framework or the maintenance works?
Probably the framework.
So that's the next agenda item, to have a look at the framework.
But, okay, so maybe it's not framework, maybe it's the criticality. I'm just
The
wondering
weightings and
about
things.
the cultural significance in your criticality framework. Are there deliberate criteria or decisions applied to cultural significance?
I can't remember, are there? Come over here, Rosemary.
The answer's in there. All right.
Through the chair, Rosemary Fletcher, I was involved in the criticality assessment, so we've taken the 4 wellbeings and used those to group the assets rather than to define the importance within that group. So
Thank you.
we've got cultural, economic, etc.
Perfect.
Is that right?
I've just been told by my colleagues that it's in the paper, so apologies for asking.
That's all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Very useful discussion and clarification. So thanks for all the questions. I'm going to put the motion, and if I could have a mover and a seconder, that we receive the report. So thanks, Josh, and Mike Timmer has seconded it. Thank you. I just wanted to comment on where this will sit going forward and how it came here now, because this the asset management weakness in our system has come up in our organisational correction improvements register quite regularly. And so having Sarah come here with the project to say we've been talking about this for a while, here it is, here's where we're at, is really important. So we will still get a view of how asset management is looking against that organisational improvement register which came out of some earlier audits. Yep. So we'll see it from there. We'll also, while the project doesn't hit a certain threshold, the asset management does, because it's huge, the billions of dollars tied up in assets, so that's of concern to us. And it will continue to sit in the risk register, and we will continue to see updates of that and if it hits the sort of strategic or enterprise risks at a level. So, so that's just a comment from me as to how I sort of saw this perhaps going forward. I was saying before the meeting to one of our members, as a chair, you can't ask all the questions first up, but I had a whole lot of questions and I've ticked every single one off that you've all asked before I asked. So thank you for that. It's always nice to know that we're thinking about the same things, and that gives the strength of this committee, I think, and the power of all of the individual members. So thank you for that. We've moved and seconded. Any other comments? Councillor Josh.
Yeah, just one very briefly, thanks. I just want to congratulate staff, the key players in this process, and the organisation as a whole for this process. And I say that because, for anyone that's been listening, particularly over the last probably 4 or 5 years, local government's reputation in terms of asset management right across the board is not great. And I say this for New Zealand as a whole. And so, this sort of process, if it's done right across the country, which hopefully it's definitely moving in that direction, will hopefully contribute to inspiring confidence in local government again. And I'm sure that there are connections to, our credit ratings, our ability to access competitive insurance rates and all those sorts of things too. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge how important this sort of work is for the sector as a whole. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. And Councillor Michael.
Yeah, I just want to really just double down on what I was mentioning earlier on, but in a more positive way. This kind of project has a lot of benefits. I've been involved with quite a few number of asset management system rollouts, hence a lot of my questions. And I want to really drill down the fact that, you should be getting lower risks of implementation problems. In 10, 20-year periods, you should have increased people's skills and NPS scores because people are generally happy with better systems. We should be seeing a decrease in our data privacy risks, and we should see a significant increase in opportunity cost and productivity of our staff and planning for the future on asset repairs and maintenance. So I'm very happy with doing this. I just have obviously a lot of questions because of the industry I'm in. Thank you.
Thank you. So just the motion on the screen, we've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? Anyone against? No, that's carried. Thank you very much, Stuart, Sarah and Rosemary for that and for your work. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the insurance update. And I think, having that really broad discussion around asset management will help us move through this. But this is the next exciting stage of our value add around, looking critically at our assets to actually look at whether we can reduce insurance costs for some of them. So I'll pass over to Mike.
Thank you. Last committee meeting we discussed in depth the concept or the journey we're on of a strategic approach to purchasing insurance. And the reason for this change in our methodology of purchasing insurance, driven largely by cost increases, and what we're going through here is not unique just to Wanganui. Other councils are starting to go down here. Businesses are going down this journey as well, and individuals are going down the journey of deciding which assets to insure and which assets they're prepared to take risk on themselves. As we go down this path, there's critical strands of work that need to be in train in order to make good decision making based on, talk about evidence-based decision making. And the focus of the item today is about one of those key strands of work that has been in progress, been working on. And as talked about the last item, defining asset criticality. And importantly, establishing that framework in which we can objectively measure criticality. I think through these discussions, these insurance discussions, it's important to understand that the decisions we make about whether to insure an asset or, importantly, not to insure an asset doesn't mean necessarily that the asset is not important for the service it provides to council or the community. It may just simply mean we're prepared to take the risk of a loss to that asset on our own balance sheet. Keep that in mind. What the team who's focusing on insurance has been conscious of as we go down this journey is that decisions that we make in regard to insurance are not made in isolation to just insurance, in isolation to other pieces of work going on. And that's important, particularly when we come to asset criticality. So the work we're doing around, or that has been done on criticality on a framework, is not solely for the purpose of insurance. Insurance comes out of that piece of work as opposed to being the reason for that piece of work. And that was explained in the last report. Asset criticality can help us focus our expenditure, help us focus on, for example, if we're going to spend money on making an asset more resilient in an event as opposed to transferring risk in an event. So the item talks about the asset criticality. It's got the framework at the end of that. We can talk about that shortly. It also talks about loss modelling, what for our critical property assets, what is the likely loss from an event. So Aon is doing that piece of work. It may come later than what I would like, but we will get it at some point in time. In conjunction with that, we're also going to run some scenarios to test our balance sheet strength. Because effectively what we're saying is for an asset we decide not to insure, we're either going to, if it's damaged, not replace it, or if we do replace it, we replace it for our balance sheet strength. So in an event, as we talked about last committee meeting, going back to my teaching days, last committee meeting, we talked about balance sheet strength and how that could change in an event. A lot of our income streams we wouldn't get, some of our expenditure lines we wouldn't need to incur. So we'll be doing that over the next few weeks. So before we get to the framework, the way I see the next steps, and I'm happy to take guidance on this. Today is about introducing the framework and answering questions on the framework. We've got a couple assets that we have ranked high, medium, low. I don't want to get into the ifs and buts about the particular assets, but it's about the framework. And I think a question that was asked before, or answered in the previous item, what happens if officers have ranked an asset right down the bottom? I see it similar to the POE, point of entry business case. If elected members say, look, it's right down the bottom, but I really do want to insure this, fine. Doesn't mean the creditor is wrong, it just means you want to insure it. So to give you exposure to the framework today, then I see a workshop being done with the independents here and the full council, all elected members, because ultimately the elected members will be making the decision for that workshop to, again, the rest of the elected members understand the framework, to understand about the balance sheet capacity, to give some indication of where the comfort level is within balance sheet capacity. We could go up to 285% of our revenue line, as we've talked about last committee meeting, but there may be no comfort to do that. And then where on the list of assets in the criticality ranking, where the cut-off line becomes, we say these ones we must insure, these ones we're prepared to take the risk. I have got in the report at paragraph 4, and just want to refer this back to that. I've got there towards the end of that paragraph, I've got insurance is one of a number of areas which contribute to a wider discussion on risk appetite. As a committee considers risk appetite and its recommendations to council and purchase of insurance, it will need to do so in a wider risk context. What I mean by that is that balance sheet appetite or balance sheet capacity is not necessarily there just to cover losses from a insurable event. There may be other events or other risks out there that we need capacity to cover if that risk is realised. So insurance is just one of the risks that can impact our balance sheet. So again, in that workshop, we will be highlighting that point in there. So I'll just make a couple comments on the framework. I'd love to take credit for the framework, but I can't. It was discussed, put together by the asset management team. So I'll make a few comments, and then any particular questions, Rosemary is available to answer those questions. So it's got there that, and we've emphasised this point here in the second paragraph to that, establishing criticality is a key to enabling appropriate prioritisation of spend and risk allocation. Again, it's more than just insurance, it's about how we allocate our expenditure. So it informs both asset management and insurance strategy. And then a key consideration has been to ensure that the framework is aligned to and responsive to Council's vision and the strategic objectives developed by management team. So it aligns to our objectives, and it's also flexible to be able to flex as it needs to do. Again, as has been emphasised, using asset criticality framework for pipes under the ground and for roadings is not suitable or applicable to above ground assets. So this framework focuses on the 4 well-beings, and then it's got within that some criteria within that, the extent of which it's used, the extent of what failure mean, the impact of failure, and the way it contributes to our overarching goals and objectives. Right, happy to take questions on the reports and on the framework. And if you have any ideas or suggestions around the next steps, which is different to what I have outlaid. I am very conscious, before I stop speaking, there are time pressures. The insurance renewal program needs to be done very soon. I was speaking with Aon on Monday, just to give them an update of this. We have spoken to them through this process, but just want to make sure that we're not too late through the renewals. And you've noticed in the next steps, I've talked about once this committee has made a recommendation, come up with a recommendation, at that point we will advise Aon to take assets off the schedule, which is before the council meeting approves it, but the timeline, we need to fit in with the timeline.
Thank you, Mike. Mayor Andrew.
Look, I've scribbled down a note here, and I think I know what I was asking when I was reading through it. And that's around reducing our premiums in regard to, I guess, the previous item around improving asset management practices, the system as a whole. Can we? I'm always looking for ways to find efficiencies, no matter how much they are. It's just good practice and a good way of changing the way that we think collectively. Will, for example, the previous project help us to reduce premiums?
Look, absolutely. The message that Aon, our insurance brokers, have been saying for a number of years is that the insurance market is after quality data on the assets. They are picking and choosing who they insure. And the better data you have, the more they understand the risk. And the more they can quantify the risk, the less they have to increase premiums by to build in the unknown. So absolutely. I'm conscious, as I mentioned before, about the renewal date. I would love right now to have some decisions on the table. However, I'm conscious that we need to make good decisions, and that's what we need to focus on.
Thank you. Mike Timmer.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike, for explaining the paper and where you're taking it, because when I read it, I wasn't sure where it was going, but I've certainly got it now. My questions relate to probably more towards the workshop. You talk about balance sheet capacity, and you understand that, but there's also this ratepayer resilience, and I think we need to make sure we put that in the scheme somewhere, because we can put much stuff on the balance sheet as we want, but what happens if interest rates go up and we're asking the ratepayers for more money? Can they afford it? We've got to remember too that the ratepayers have got to pay for these assets, so we'll be charging them interest and principal for the next 20 years to get these assets back. So I think that's a really important piece of work that we need to do. Just a question I have to you is about valuation. Have we got a new valuation on these assets, on our assets at the moment, or are we relying on last year's data?
We've put in a budget into the long-term plan to do the loss modelling, and also to do an insurance valuation for our critical high-value assets.
Okay, and they're the ones that we will be giving to Aon, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. And you mentioned that Aon, we were talking about asset quality and asset information and stuff. Because we're in a collective, we're relying on everyone else to have good data as well. And I guess we're only as good as the worst person in the collective, because they can, if they've got bad data, then we could end up in getting negatively impacted because of that. So, how do you feel about the rest of the people in the collective? Are they all aligned to really get better at this? And we've talked about doing specific reports for the big buildings like the Sargent Gallery and this building here and some of the big buildings. Are the other people doing all that stuff, and are they going to be really focused on it?
I'd love to be able to say that we're all going on the same journey, we're all in the same place. We're absolutely not. I can't speak where other councils are at, but I know the message from Aon, and the message from Aon comes from the insurers down in London and the big insurers about asset data and accuracy data. So that message has been around for quite some time. When we last spoke to Aon, which was probably 1 or 2 months ago, about a month ago, we talked about this framework that we're doing, we talked about the journey we're on, and they made the comment that we're one of only 3 or 4 councils on this journey right now. Some have been forced into this journey, but I suspect as we go through the next few years, other councils will be forced down this journey as well as the premiums become of concern. So we're not all at the same place, but I suspect in a period of time we'll all end up in the same place.
Cheers, thanks.
Mayor Andrew. Sorry. Oh, I thought I might have cut you off. No. So, Councillor Michael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm probably being stupid, Mike, but what you said versus what I see feels different. You're saying that it's not important or it is important, that's why we're insuring it, and I get that. But you've put on this model is about the criticality of the asset and whether or not it's almost valuable enough to insure. So my question, I guess, is you use a quote you a little bit. You said prepared to take the risk, but we're not taking the risk, are we? We're confirming that we will self-insure this on the balance sheet and self-fund the insurance if it goes wrong.
I think there is and I want to try to relay the message that this is not about the value of an asset to the community, it's about where the risk sits. And I think that came out a little bit in the decision we made about the assets we've taken off the schedule, the decision we made last committee meeting and council confirmed. We took an asset off the insurance schedule because it had a low risk of damage in an event, which does not mean the asset is not important. So because of our insurance premiums, where that's going, we're going to make a decision that an asset that is damaged, yes, we will likely replace it because it's important to us, but we're prepared to take it on a balance sheet. So as we make decisions to take assets off a balance sheet, I don't want the public to believe that that asset we're taking off a balance sheet is not important to us or the community. That's all the message I'm trying to relay.
Okay, so it's taking the risk is about we are personally going to take the balance sheet risk, not risk of losing the asset.
Once an asset is, yes, but once an asset is damaged, a decision needs, particularly if the asset is not insured, the first decision is, do we replace the asset? If the answer is yes, then do we replace it in a different type of functional replacement?
Okay.
And then if yes, then we put it on a balance sheet, the cost of that.
Okay, thank you. And number 2 for this one is, why is this an elected member's decision?
It is absolutely the elected member's decision because of the level of risk that this poses on a potential balance sheet. Deciding not to insure a large asset if an event happened and a large asset was destroyed and not insured, as officers we need to go back and say we fully informed all parties, and a robust decision was made around that.
Okay.
David, did you have a response to that?
Outside delegations is the straight answer.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, you're totally outside my delegation and not a trap I'm going to walk into, Michael. I know your comments you've made previously. Just on the first part of your question, though, I actually think the risk is both. It's not just whether it's on the balance sheet risk or whether we will or won't replace it. If you think about it, if you step back away from this being insurance specific, what we're talking about is how do we recover from an event and how do we pay for that recovery? And we can guarantee we can pay for some of the recovery by insuring it, and we know that money's coming in. Then we can pay for the balance on our balance sheet. But the predictions around the event are just that. And the only thing you can guarantee about the prediction is it will be wrong. Our guess around what our maximum probable loss will cost us, how big the event will be, how many of our community choose to, like in Christchurch, leave the region and the impact on our income. We can run scenarios to predict those things to give us an idea of what situation we may be facing. But the likelihood is that when it actually happens, it will be different from the scenario that we predict. So there is still going to be a risk that you've chosen to self-insure and put the risk on the balance sheet, but that when you get there, the balance sheet simply isn't big enough to take it for that given circumstance when the risk actually materialises. So hence the criticality is the most critical assets need to be paid for by insurance because you can guarantee you can pay for them. Then you want to start prioritising how you apply your balance sheet to the most critical assets thereafter. And if you can't afford to replace everything, then the least critical assets are the ones that are at the bottom of the list that get paid for last.
Thank you, David. Councillor Kate?
Thank you. I mean, really good work and really appreciate the direction of travel on this. There's been some discussion around the quality of the data presented to our insurers and that making a difference or not to our insurance premiums. And then what I heard was that the lowest, the poorest gather of data determines the insurance premium across the collective. I didn't think that was the case, so can you just clarify that?
No, I don't believe that is the case. We are due to talk with Aon on Monday, and I'll get some more information on that. I've never, in summary, I don't believe our premiums go up, if at all significantly, because somebody in the group has low quality data. If it all go up at all, but I will discuss that with Aon.
Yeah, can we understand that better?
Yes, and when we have the workshop, I will have some information around that.
Right,
Could I just add what I'm trying to say here is I'm trying to fish out, for example, do all the people in the collective have an earthquake assessment on all their buildings, for example? Some mightn't, some might. So if they haven't got information, insurers are not going to be, then they're going to fill as Aon says, they fill the gap with premium. So if we've got all different people with different things, we can get tarred by the brush of other people. But as you say, I see what Aon says, but that's my experience from dealing with collectives.
Yeah, it's what's the financial flow on to anybody else in the collective that I'm not entirely clear about either. So if we could have that clarified with Aon, I think that would be useful, and even just a note to come out or something to clarify that. That's because that's where it's what is the impact of other people's action or inaction around this work, and we need to understand if we go down a certain track and make quite critical decisions about our critical assets and reduce, what we're putting up to be insured, then therefore minimising or reducing our premium, are we then picking up somebody else's work where they haven't done that? That's the train of thought that I've got.
Yes.
Kate?
How, what members of the collective bleed into or not, into what the effect is on the others. Because I guess the next question would be, and maybe this is too out there, the next question is, well, should we not be part of the collective?
Look, I think these are really good questions. When we have spoken to Aon about where we're at in this process, they have offered to be involved in a workshop or a meeting. They're happy to come and actually do that. Something to consider if we want Aon present for part of a workshop to answer things like that or take us through it. I'm sure they're happy to come and be involved.
Thank you. David, did you have something?
Well, I think just to round this off, we hear the question loud and clear. You want to know that we're in the collective because it offers better value for money than going it alone, and then you want assurance that the other parties in the collective are not compromising our value for money.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Yep. And also that as we progress this work, that we will benefit from an insurance premium reduction.
Yep, that's cool. You.
Just one question, Mike, and you did touch on it, but it'd be really important when we go to the workshop is understanding where we are in terms of our future planning with resilience around our assets, because if we build resilience into our assets, then, and then we don't need to insure them as much, or we might need to insure them at all. And also in terms of the data we've given to the insurance companies, they say, oh, well, yes, this building's built to an IL4 standard. This is pretty bulletproof. The premiums aren't going to be so high for it. So I think that's a really important thing to talk about at the workshop and to have focus on in the future. If we're going down the path of insuring less and less and less, we need to be bringing more and more resilience into things.
Cool, thank you. I'll put the motion, if I can have a mover and a seconder for it, please. Thank you, Pete. Oh, thank you, and seconded Councillor Jenny. Mike was specifically asking for any comments on the criticality framework. I'm just going to the comments just before we approve the motion. I don't think we've had, I think we've accepted through the paper that the criticality framework as it's been presented, that we're comfortable to take that process through to the workshop. Is that what people are saying? Yep. Cool, thank you. Just to give Mike a good steer. And there has been a lot of work and thinking go into that framework clearly. And just one other point from me, as we think about the workshop, and your timelines look good, so that if we can actually get some information to council that on the 24th of October, that would be really useful. But also that we have a sense of the other pressures on the balance sheet and the risk appetite at that workshop, so that we can work this through with full information, not just based on the insurance necessarily. Comments from me. So we've moved and seconded. So I'll put the motion that we receive the report. Oh, sorry, Michael.
I
sorry.
just want to expand on why I like and don't like this.
Cool.
So I like the question asked, do I like the critical assessment? I do. But then the full question should be, do I like the critical assessment to be used for insurance procurement? No, personally. And the reason why I don't is I was expecting to see more cost of capital, maximum exposure, timelines, risk assessment. I feel like the critical assessment could be a feeder into this model that I'm thinking of in my head. And that is because the calculations are great. They do tell us what should be replaced very quickly. But how do we do that? So my thought process along this is yes, this should be replaced and quickly, but how do we do that? Insurance or not, balance sheet or not, risk of OPEX insurance versus CAPEX exposure over a 20-year period. I think that's missing, personally, but that's just my view. And just to double down on should elected members have this choice, I say no on this. I know there's probably a delegations thing here, but here's my reasoning. This is a financial management decision. The competency required to make this decision is outside the curfew of elected members. And it's not an insult. That's not an insult. because this is quite complex. I'm too dumb to know this, Mike, like, to be frank. I say as elected members, I should say what should be replaced. You guys should be saying how it's replaced. And I feel like we're getting this routine, and you've started asking the question, should we have insurance or not? It's a great question to ask. I feel like a lot of people just have insurance because that's what you should have. And I like your approach to proving that you need insurance. So that's why I think it should be your decision, not mine. Back to you.
Right. Did you have something further to say, Mike?
I just wanted to talk about it, but I suspect someone else might before me.
Just in terms of the delegations and things, right? We need to. Is there any comment on delegation for this sort of thing?
For me, this is a really big decision for this council to make. Management can make a recommendation, and management needs to tell the elected members what the implications of the decision are, and not to be rude, but can dumb it down to dollars and cents, and so that the elected members can understand what decisions that a management are recommending. It's as simple as that. So it is a decision for my way of thinking of the elected members, because it's a big decision. And I don't, and as you and the delegations bit is quite relevant as well, very relevant in fact.
And I think we the last meeting worked through, that the particular items that were on the list, and there were questions about whether we should be insuring or not, and that sort of thing. The criticality framework for me has brought forward another way of looking at all of the assets and assessing those, so that as a group, as a committee, we can critically analyse it all, ask more questions, and then make recommendations that make it reasonably straightforward with the help of management. But the delegation question is something I would need to ask David. Yes, please, could you make a comment?
Through you, Madam Chair, I've had a little bit of a smile on my face because I'm much more closely aligned to Mike Timmer's way of thinking here. It's an incredibly large decision, and if you were to delegate it to me, you would be putting an incredible amount of responsibility and accountability into a single person. And to be honest, I would be using my prerogative to refer things back to council anyway, because just because you give me the delegation doesn't stop me from bringing it back to you. This decision's too big, and yeah, I would want to have that discussion and that endorsement of council when that decision was made, because again, like my comments before, the predictions are going to be wrong. And this is about picking a number that we've got as much confidence as we possibly can is going to be in the right kind of ballpark, so that we can optimise our insurance expenditure. But it'll be wrong in some shape, format, because it is based on predictions and guesses around what will happen in the future. And I don't think it would be an accountability I'd be willing to accept. It would be to take on responsibility for being the person that makes that guess all on their own. So that's why it needs to stay at the governance table.
Thank you. Kate, Councillor.
Oh, look, I might as well wade into this. Totally agree. Like, that's what we have a collective for.
Yeah.
For those really big decisions, really community shaping decisions. I mean, that's why we're here. Simple, really.
Cool. There you go, Councillor Michael. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So we need to, we've put the motion, we've moved and seconded, so can we now, the Risk and Assurance Committee receives the report, Asset Management Project update. All those in favour? Anyone against? Thank you, that's carried. I might suggest we have a break now, because we've got a strategic risk update where it might take a little bit longer. So let's have a 10 minutes or 10-minute break from now. Thank you. Hey, welcome back, everybody. I just need to note that there was an incorrect paper in our papers, and we need to move to accept this paper. Okay. So what you've got in front of you now is the Health and Safety and Wellbeing Report for April, May and June 2024. And so this needs to replace the one in our pack. This is the quarterly report dashboard. So can I put the motion that we receive the additional information for item 5.5, and I'll move it, and Josh will second it. Thank you. Anyone? Everyone for it?
Oh, can I just ask a quick question? What is the difference?
It was titled June 2023, July 2023 was in our pack, and that we overlooked that.
So nothing consequential?
No, but this Olivia reports quarterly to us, so there are 3 dashboards, and we had an incorrect one-pager in there. We've now got April, May and June 2024 when we come to that item.
Yeah.
Anyone? So that's the motion. It's been moved and seconded. Everyone for it?
Cool.
Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Debbie, I'm going to pass over to you for the Strategic Risk Update report.
Thank you. Through the Chair, you've just heard from the previous 2 presenters some pretty in-depth information, but just want to reassure you that that actually deals with 2 of our strategic risks. So the time that you spent and the dialogue that you've had and the questioning and the understanding actually benefits us collectively as an organisation. It's actually addressing those risks. So just moving on, I know that was pretty hard work, but it was good to see questioning coming from that and reassurance. This committee is about assurance, and this is part of the strategic risk discussion. Strategic risks, as you know, are dynamic, they're never static, and we're actually moving forward with those. You'll see in this report that there is a slightly different approach this time, because ELT recently did a top of mind. Could also be relayed as a brain dump, but we've actually got the top of mind things that really matter and that are keeping ELT awake at night. So I'm going to address a couple of things in this report, and then I'm going to hand over the questioning for the committee to talk to the relevant ELT members that are here, because these are their risks. But firstly, I want to draw the attention of the committee to some emerging. We do an exercise called PESTLE. So PESTLE's a bit of an acronym. So PESTLE looks at the political, economic, social, legal, technological and environmental space out there. And some of these things have come out of that more recently. So again, gold clam, not an issue here in our river, but certainly in the Waikato and the Waikato Regional Council and the Lake Taupo Aquatic Park have it there. So something that MPI are looking at. We may have seen a little bit of information out there with the avian flu, known as bird flu, certainly affecting Australia pretty much, not long before birds migrate, come here. Emerging risks are those things on our horizon that may not be here right now, but we're aware that they may impact on us. And the other one there that you'll note is the NZTA funding change. It was actually in the media yesterday as well. So we're trying to front foot a lot of these emerging risks so we can actually put some strategies in place and have that awareness of what may or may not happen, or they may not be realised. Another one in there to draw to your attention is the changes from what was the previous top 10, just that the drop out of the organisational planning and budgeting processes. You would have seen how the LTP actually worked and the implementation of new processes within that. Future local government review is no longer being proceeded with, and political change during an election year, that's actually moved on as well. So in summary, I'm going to take the report as read, and I'm happy to answer any questions or for ELT to address their own risks. Thank you very much.
Cool. So thank you for the report and the work that ELT have done to make the strategic risk reporting dynamic and current. Any questions at this stage? Councillor Peter.
Yes, I'm very interested in the first or the most new critical one, and that's how we monitor the 6-point plan and where it will be reported to. Does it get reported back if we're failing or succeeding in the thing? Does it get reported back to here or to the Performance and Operations and Performance Committee?
Yes, over to you, David.
Through your worship, there will be a regular report coming up that summarises our progress. I'm actually working on it at the moment, that breaks down each of the individual initiatives that sit under each of the 6 points. And my view would be that those reports go to the Operations and Performance Committee, because it is about how we're performing against the actual budgets and plans that we've made for ourselves.
Then my second question.
And what I would expect to still see here is in our strategic risk register, if you're still not, if it's still rated really highly like that and it hits the top 10, then we will see the reporting and the mitigations on that as well, because it just becomes regular reporting on the risk register.
Yeah, I look forward to the first report. The question of emerging risks. Could it be possible that we also, as an agenda item, that there is something similar to that on our agenda, because during the months that we're here, I see risk everywhere. And, so it's, there's the international one, risks, and then there are the national risks that we have, and then there are local risks that we have. If we could have those sort of 3 priorities that we could just quickly dump, what we think during the month or between meetings in there.
Yeah, I was pleased to see the emerging risks on here. I think they have taken that pestle approach, and I take your point, Peter, about how this becomes sort of dynamic, and the committee itself can feed into those emerging risks. Can I work with maybe with Debbie on how we might do that? I mean, we can do it through a workshop, clearly. But as you're saying, there are things coming up all the time. We'd need to assess those risks and decide whether they come here or whether it's just a great big list that we do nothing with. I mean, we would need, So if Debbie and I, with David, we could have a look at, how we might do that in a way that we capture committee members' big emerging risks from their perspective and feed them into this report somehow.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. I think I've got Councillor Michael next.
Me again. From the process point of view, the strategic risk stage, is that being documented somewhere? The stage where it's at, owned, mitigated, etc.?
Through the chair, had you have had the full reporting behind this, you will see in the reporting, and as presented to the committee at various stages, you will see whether the risks are treat or tolerate, and then the risk treatments that come in to that behind that. So what you have here is just a high-level summary.
Cool. I thought so. I just, and my other question then, because that's including the owner, I'm assuming as well, like the other reports have the owner. Yep, cool. Risk bite, term I just created. What risk bite have we got? Because it's all good having these critical risks, but in some organisations, the bite is you push back. There's a risk here, obviously this is David's risk, around not meeting the financial targets. If it's critical, then maybe we shouldn't have accepted it into the LTP. Does that make sense? Like if a risk has reached a certain point, then there should be action behind that risk.
So where that actually comes out really is into your risk appetite discussions. So what is the appetite for risk? So are you going to treat? Are you going to tolerate? Can you transfer the risk? But don't forget too that sometimes your risks are actually opportunity risks. Yep. Wearing threat clothing. So it's actually thinking beyond the threat and finding that opportunity within that risk. So I think that's part of that wider risk maturity journey that council and management and the operational side are both on as well. So we'll explore that a little bit more when we actually have the workshop as well.
That'd be nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Councillor Jenny.
Thank you very much. Mine's a simple question. It's the third one down. Actually, I'm really pleased to have seen the number of risks that dropped out and why, and having the new ones come in. The third one down, in light of what happened with Cyclone Gabriel last year in Tairāwhiti and the impact on communications there with the internet being down for an extended period, and then of course the very recent almost global shutdown, I think that sort of thing, so it's not necessarily nefarious, it's just an act of God, but that needs to be built into that as well, because our dependency on, you know, the internet is quite pervasive now. So it's not just about, like, you know, bad actors, it's also about things that just happen.
Sure, and I guess here the fact that we've got mitigations brings that sort of revised risk down. That's the way I would see it. But I have been thinking too, along the same lines as you, is that there are risks that are just perpetual, that we can almost do, you know, have some mitigations against, but actually it will happen. Things will happen even if we've got our mitigations that are out of our control in some
So it's a
respect.
case of when it happens,
Yes.
what are we going to do? Because
yeah.
we should now know that it is going to happen. It's a bit like the river. We know it's going to flood. It's just a matter of when. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mike Timmer.
Yeah, I was just thinking when I was reading this about what's happening at the Hawke's Bay Regional Council and their problems that they're up against at the moment with their flood protection or lack of clearing the river mouth, and I was wondering how our risk fitted into here, because when you lose confidence of the public, it's something that's really hard to get back, and it just completely annihilates management and time spending firefighting. But I see you've got a new risk here. You've got increased exposure to public trust resulting in intensification exposure by councillors, socials, sentimental factors, blah, blah, blah. So I guess it's covered underneath that. Would that be right, Debbie?
Correct, it is broadly covered under that. Having reflected, though, on the Cyclone Gabrielle and the wider reporting that has gone on around a number of reports that have come out of there, there is also in our operational space, particularly around the civil defence, a risk profile in there which is being managed and mitigated at the moment, because it crosses over both operational and strategic.
Yes, thanks.
Councillor Josh.
Yeah, thank you. My question's around the increased erosion of public trust as well, and it piqued my interest because, unlike a lot of these other ones, it's also highly political in nature, and it's one of those overarching questions internationally that I don't think any decision-making body has found the magic bullet for. And so I'm particularly interested in the controls that are being developed, and I'd like to know, in terms of the ELT ownership, who is leading that piece of work and what it looks like at this point.
So I can answer that initially and then pass over to David as a CE. This was something that's come up across wider government as well, particularly the misdis and malinformation. There's a lot of information out there. You're right, there is no perfect solution to this, but I think knowing that it exists at least gives some tools and some thought, which is why it's written in there that the solutions and everything else is still being worked through, because it's actually, this is quite fresh. So it actually will require a little bit of work, dialogue, thinking and engagement to actually decide what can we do and what can't we do. But I'll pass on to David to add a little bit more to that.
Through you, Madam Chair. In addition to what Debbie's just said, in terms of who's going to own it, it'll be myself, but it is also, as you've kind of indicated, probably going to be quite pervasive across our leadership team, but also around the council governance table, because we are two halves of one team, and we all need to be kind of managing that public trust and that reputation management piece of the council as an organisation as well. In terms of the controls that we're looking at, we are looking at a resetting of our communications policies and procedures. We're a little bit too focused at the moment, in my view, on the kind of tactical day-to-day answering media inquiries from the newspaper, putting press releases out, rather than actually focusing on the big strategic issues and communicating with our residents so they know actually what we're doing and how we're doing it. There's a saying, it's not enough to just do the right thing. You've got to be seen to be doing the right thing and making sure our community understands what we're doing and why we're doing it, most importantly. There's also a lot of resources available from the Office of the Auditor General around building public trust that we're just doing a little bit of research into at the moment, in particular around putting together what's referred to as an integrity framework. Now, we already have a lot of components that make up an integrity framework, things like how do people blow the whistle, make protected disclosures. We have the components, but actually formalising it and bringing it together in a very deliberate way to demonstrate transparency in a way that builds trust with the community is a step that I think we're going to be building up towards. There'll be a whole heap of other stuff that we need to put in there as well that we haven't yet thought of. But as you say, in an age of disinformation, the emergence of AI and fake videos and all of those things, as well as any kind of own goals we may score as a team that harm our trust, all of that comes together to make this, quite a big risk that's not going to go away anytime soon.
Oh, it's huge, and I mean, in terms of the work program of this committee, I think one of the outcomes or the learnings from the most recent long-term plan is how important it is to be prepared in the lead up to the next one, but also in the lead up to any major decision that council makes. And so I guess my comment is that I'd really like to see this as a consistent part of the work program of this committee going forward.
Thank you. Can I just, I think there was an opportunity for us to ask ELT, the ELT members who are here, about their perspectives on these risks, or their, if we look at, could I invite Lance and Catherine to join the table, please? What I'd like to just to focus on for this session is that big risk where we've got critical, initial and revised risk. So this is the 6-point plan. This is the cost saving, the efficiency gains, the additional non-rates revenue. And I thought it would be useful for us to hear from each of you about what the impact of that is in your area and what you're doing about it. Does that make it reasonably straightforward?
Probably not, but...
Thank you.
Yeah, look, I guess from a people perspective, in my space that I work in mainly, when we go through any kind of change or change management for the organisation, there's always, I guess, the unknowns and the impacts on staff, the ability to attract people, and it's navigating those things as well, where we might want to be in the future from a workforce perspective and what we need to develop in that space. So that's certainly a large piece of work that's sitting within my team that we're wanting to do in the future as we have capacity to do that. So it always comes with that level of risk, I guess. When I say level of risk is, people are people, but managing their feelings and thoughts around any form of change that we undertake and taking them on that journey and getting them to understand what that looks like for them, because there's nothing worse when you have uncertainty or don't have the information to help what your future looks like, or autonomy in regards to what's happening to you as well. So it is navigating that and managing that risk around, I guess, people and what we want to achieve together, as opposed to being we make the decisions for everybody and they go, why are you doing that? Yeah.
Thank you. Lance, from your perspective.
Yeah, it's probably along the same lines as what Catherine said, really. It's become a lot more natural, I guess, to weave the well-being aspect into any of these types of levers, if you like, into how we plan and execute those sort of moves. Gone are the days of just sort of not taking on board feedback and, just ticking boxes. That you can't. We're not a team that does that. So, the person well-being bit's been a big focus for us throughout this. Aside from the fact that I've been really proud with how the guys have sort of gone through this process, it's also an opportunity though to reset the way we do some things. So you talked about the risk around the reputation and what have you. So as we look at better ways to do communications, these are the opportunities to reset and look at how we do that, and how we can perhaps share that around a bit, not only amongst other managers but amongst this team as well. So we all have a part in it, and hopefully it makes a difference. Excuse me, I've got a rabbit in my throat.
Okay, any other questions or?
Yeah, question for you, Lance. What keeps you up at night? What keeps you awake at night? What is the most thing that worries you in your area?
I was going to say my grandson when he stays pretty frequently. I'm a bit of a people leader, I guess. So usually it's anything to do with impacts on our people and their well-being. So at the moment, it's some of that that stuff we talked about, the impact of this. I'm trying to be careful how I say this. The way that sort of society is treating people at the moment, especially in roles of authority, because it's often not day to day those of us in the authority roles that cop it. It's our people, and so that that concerns me greatly. And where that's heading, it seems to be going to get still hasn't bottomed out yet. I don't think so. I'm sure there's other things, Mike. It just depends sometimes how much coffee I've had.
Thank you, you two. I'd also just like to say, great to see the new performance management framework being implemented. So yes, I know that's been in the planning for a while, and good to see how that will actually improve service delivery and accountability through a framework like that. So thank you for that work. Does anyone have any questions? No. We've been saying we're going to do this for a little while, so I felt in terms of inviting ELT to the table rather than just asking David to talk about strategic risks. So thank you for this, and we'll continue to include you in the discussions as we look at those critical risks. So thanks, and appreciate the work that you do. If nobody else has any more questions, I'll just put the motion and look for a mover and a seconder to receive the report. Thank you, Josh. Seconder, Jenny. Thank you. Any comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Debbie, back to you just for strategic legal compliance exceptions report.
Thank you. Through the chair, just presenting the statutory legal compliance report. You'll notice in this report, because we've actually had 3 iterations of it, you'll see a trend analysis in there, and it's quite a positive trend with improvements. Again, noting that this is an exception report. So I'm happy to take the report as read and to answer any questions or direct those questions to the relevant ELT member for the group. Thank you.
Cool. Councillor Josh.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question around recruitment and the Resource Management Act space. Just wanting to get a general sense of the lay of the land around recruitment for, highly skilled planners, senior planners, and so on. And the reason that I say that is that I know in previous years it's been really quite strained on the sector. There's been a lot of competition with the private market, for instance. And just wanting to get a sense of whether that shifted at all or where it sits for us at the moment.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, three worship. Maz has disappeared, so I'll field this one. Look, it's still really tough, particularly in the environmental planner space. We have been advertising and actively trying to recruit for a team leader and a senior planner for over a year now. And we continue to carry those vacancies. We've had specialist recruitment agents doing searches for us, finding suitably qualified, talented senior planners is a challenge, and then we are in a war for that talent with the private sector. A lot of the consultants are able to outcompete us in terms of wages and salaries compared to what we can offer, even when we apply a premium compared to the normal salary ranges we would offer. We're still getting outgunned by the private sector. So it's a challenge at the moment. Yeah.
And just a supplementary to that, so obviously you've alluded to the additional costs that come from being in a competitive marketplace. But in terms of the capacity within the consultant market to fill the gap, is that, are we able to access what we need in that space in the interim?
Three, Your Worship, yes. We have come a long way. And I should probably have opened with that. About a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, we had no staff planners in our planning team. We have now managed to rebuild the team and remove a lot of the reliance on the consultants, which has helped tremendously, one from a fees and charges point of view, so we don't have to charge as much for that service because the staff do come at a lower cost than the consultants. So as we've reduced our reliance on consultants, the capacity is clearly there because we don't need as much of it as we have previously been using. The issue is really a cost one, but also when you're using consultants that aren't based locally, often that can be an issue of contention with consent applicants who feel like they're getting a rather distant service, or they don't have the local Wanganui specific knowledge that a staff planner would have.
Cool.
Cool, thank you. Any other questions on this? Debbie, I just thought it would be useful to put, I know this is the exceptions report. It would be quite useful to know how many legal compliance things are on our register, because we only get the exceptions here, yeah? So there must be a full list of legislative requirements? No?
Through you, Madam Chair, could we maybe have a offline discussion about that? I'm conscious. I think there are 125 bits of legislation that local governments have to operate under.
Yep.
It's a very large list that we'd be bringing routinely to this.
Sorry,
forum.
my question wasn't about the list. It was that there are 125 and they are on our system so that we are checking those, and all we're getting is 3 that are currently exceptions. That's correct? Yes. And so that's what I just wanted to sort of see, that. So that's the number, not the whole list, but it's the number, and then these are the ones where we know we're not.
Yes,
yep.
That's right. So
Thank you.
Effectively this report is every known non-compliance that the management team is aware of.
Yep.
So if it's not on this list, it's because we genuinely believe we are compliant with.
Yes, thank you. Just I know how significant and how big that list is. So, generally speaking, that it would be good just to see that in the context of the 3 that we're not. Thank you. Okay, I'll go sorry, Mike.
Yeah, sorry, I probably ask this question every time, and I apologise. I guess for me, you know, that David said it's just 125 bits of legislation, but within those legislative things, there's hundreds of things that we've got to you know, comply with, etc. For me, it's more a question of well, how do we know we've caught them all? Do we have an external agency like Comply With that says, okay, as a council, these are all the things you should be looking at? What's the basis of catching everything so that we know we can tick it off?
Interesting question. So I guess where this comes back to is the initial intention of this was to provide exception reporting. Now, any type of audit, follow back, referencing back, we do have a legal compliance risk assessment program in place. This is additional to that. And I'm just mindful of the amount of legislation that actually comes out from central government repeatedly. If you looked at the bills and acts, you know, there's always things coming out there. If we think about the committee as providing assurance, the exception reporting that you get, it provides the assurance as best as we can give based on not only managers that own the portfolio, but also ELT's view of where we are. You're right with the legislation and beyond.
Where I'm coming from is some councils have a program called Comply With, which is a legal program that everyone goes through and ticks off everything that's in there. So it's sort of like a checklist. So all I'm trying to ferret or trying to find out is, how do we know we've looked at everything? That's all I'm trying to find out. Does that make sense? Have we covered everything? Because there's a multitude of things. I know there's thousands of things, but how do we know we've? And you're giving the exceptions. Great. We don't need all the detail. I just need to get some comfort that we've looked at every act. Everybody's looked at it and knows that they've ticked off everything that they have to do in there. That's where I'm driving at.
Yeah. So through you, Madam Chair, we don't have that particular tool, but we do have a list of all of the legislation that is relevant to us, and part of this process of identifying the exceptions is effectively using it as a checklist. As an executive team, we go through and review the drafts of these report and challenge and use the list of legislation as a checklist to go, what about this, what about that? And the leadership, the management tiers below us also provide the same kind of scrutiny and feed into this report so that we are as thorough as possible, getting a true picture of where our current non-compliances are. But it is always point in time stuff where we've said we're compliant. Something could happen and we could be non-compliant tomorrow. So it's a continuous exercise as well, where we continually challenge and monitor all of these things. The other thing that we're doing at the moment as one of our improvement opportunities is making sure that all of our resource consents, where we're the consent holder and we have obligations to meet the resource consent conditions, are held in a centralised register so that we've got full visibility across every consent where we have obligations across the whole organisation. Previously, they've been dispersed, so the water guys would look after the water ones, parks would look after parks. We now, hopefully very soon, will have a central repository. So not only are we compliant with the primary legislation of the RMA, we're then compliant with the resource consents and the consent conditions that are issued under the primary legislation. So we're getting to that second tier of legislative compliance and assurance as well.
Thank you. Thank you, David. If there are no other comments or questions, I'll call for this motion. A mover and a seconder. Peter and Jenny, thank you. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll move that we receive the report, Statutory Legal Compliance Exception Report, Q3. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, we're now going to move to our late item, which is the audit of Whanganui District Council's 2024 annual report. Everybody received that and has had time to read it? Yep. Okay. I'll pass over to Mike.
Thank you. I'll take the item as read. I'll just highlight one point around the timing of the audit and the timing of the adoption of long-term plan. Under changes to legislation, as I've put in the item, that if council adopts the long-term plan post-June, but before the end of September, the timeline for adopting the long-term plan has been extended from the end of April to the end of December. We have a council meeting at the end of October where we're hoping to be able to adopt the annual reports, but we're just working with audit about whether that can fit into the practicalities of doing it, given that audit is still currently auditing long-term plans. I will note that as we adopted our long-term plan on the 16th of July, we'd normally at this committee try to bring the audit management report for the long-term plan just to tie that off. That report hasn't yet been completed. That should come to the next committee meeting. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions on this report? No? That's great. So I'll put the motion, I'll move it, that we receive the report. And a seconder, please. Oh, thank you, Josh. Any other comments, questions? No? Thank you. I'll put the motion then that we receive the report, Audit of Wanganui District Council's 2024 Annual Report. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Moving right along. We're now up to item 5.5, which is the Quarterly Health and Safety Wellbeing Dashboard, noting that this is the replacement 3 pages, the 3 dashboards. And I'll welcome Olivia to the table. Nice to see you again. Can you just give us a very brief overview and then we'll take any questions. Thank you.
Afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thanks very much. The months roll round incredibly quickly. It doesn't seem like that long ago we were here. So as you've noted, April, May, June quarterly report, providing just that level of oversight. So you'll see from the report there was a downward trend in the recordable injuries. So there's a lost time injuries, medical treatment injuries. And just a note on the internal focus that we've been moving through council, which is personal and workplace resilience. And I've noted there in very brief terms what those mean, but we're trying to encourage the resilience of our staff and additionally encourage the resilience of our organisation. Each person comes with their own resilience, but as an organisation we can't always rely on those people to not be using that resilience elsewhere in their lives. So we're really trying to work on encouraging our workplaces to be fair, equitable, not excessively stressing our staff. Also noting there that the Recovery Centre and Wanganui Partners are now sitting under Council's Health and Safety and that the Port is no longer part of my remit, and I really wanted to thank the Port staff for the improvements in the work they've done, health and safety in their areas as well, and the amount of engagement that I've had in that area. May we had 0 threatening incidents, which was great, and then we had a rise again in June. And I think I've noted to this committee report before that when we do have a specific threatening incident, it does get reported to 105 or 111. We're not taking these lightly. These are incidents that need to go to the police, especially when staff are carrying out their lawful duties. Happy for my report to be accepted and take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Josh.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question around staff wellbeing and the personal resilience project, if you can call it that. I know you've included a summary in the report, but can you expand a bit about what that looks like in practice?
Sure. So number one is giving managers the resources and tools and actually explaining what it means. We're no longer living in an age where it's, sort of suck it up and just off you go. We really need to be mindful that people need to be supported by their teams. They need to be supported by their managers. And research indicates that the number one the number one indicator of strong, resilient teams is having good team support and having good managerial support. So that's what we've been focusing on at the moment. So really education is number one, and then from there moving on to other programs that individual departments might want to see. It's not fruit baskets, put it that way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No, that's, then I'll, oh, sorry, Jenny.
Sorry, late
Councillor, yeah.
question. Olivia, bearing in mind that there is never any excuse for threatening behaviour, so it's totally unacceptable. This little glitch of 3, I'm just wondering whether there's any commonality in what that behaviour is. I mean, did it come immediately after, fees went up, and, what's driving it?
So those 3 all sat in the parking department,
Yeah, I
which
can
was
see that.
unfortunate for those staff members. But the 3 incidents were quite disparate.
Okay, yep, that's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I have a mover and a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Mayor, and seconded by Josh. Any comments? I'll put the motion that we receive the report, the Quarterly Health and Safety and Wellbeing Dashboard Report, April, May, June 2024. If everyone in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Olivia. Now on to your Chair's NZ update. Good to see the progress, and it's still a very sizable piece of work, and I was wondering if we can get it to a sort of a shape where it starts to feel like, okay, we've done all those ones. This is what we're focusing on now. So, but thank you for the report. If there's anything you'd like to highlight, please do that, and then we'll open for questions.
Nothing specific to highlight, apart from the fact that they are all in progress.
Yeah.
They are all moving forward, and we will get to the point where it is just day-to-day task and business as usual. And we're nearly at that point now.
Good.
Yeah.
That's
So,
great.
and we did speak at ELT the other day that it's now almost time to draw that line in the sand and
Right.
go, okay, let's consolidate, let's monitor, make sure these improvements have actually made some difference and people are still carrying them out, and then move forward with whatever is the next piece of work.
Good. Okay, that's cool. Any questions? There's one big red on the spreadsheet which comes at us on about size, I don't know what font. It's 0.1. And it's probably in the bigger report too, but could you just talk to that for a minute, please? Just, the spreadsheet I'm talking about, the one that's attached.
Yeah.
That's page 53
That's in the
for
governance
us.
and leadership.
Yes.
That may be an anomaly red square.
Oh, okay, right.
It's not attached to any text. So I'd have to go back and just have another look at that, because
Okay.
mine is probably less than 0.0
Okay.
of a font.
Could you just, if it is, could you just, through democracy, maybe just send it out again with it corrected if it's not supposed to be a red? Yeah, I couldn't see where it was red on your wider report, so I couldn't, then there was a spreadsheet. So if we could just clarify that, please, yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm going to volunteer an explanation that I think is right. As Olivia said, it's an anomaly.
Right.
Looking at the item it's against, which is the identification of the critical risks, it may have been marked as red because it was one that I'd flagged with Olivia as being of particular interest to me.
Right.
So the red just indicates that Olivia took note.
But then if it was a particular note to the Chief Executive, would it be something that we would want to know about too?
Through you, no, it was just one that I'd expressed, identifying those critical risks, making sure we've got good, thorough risk assessments in place was one of my priorities.
Right.
So I suspect that's Olivia just making a note.
Okay,
the boss is interested in that one.
Right.
Critical risk is always our priority,
Yes,
and will
thank
always be
you.
in red in some stage.
Okay. Thank you. If we could just have that corrected, that would be great. If no other questions, I'll put the motion that we receive the report. I'm happy to move. Somebody to second. Thanks, Josh. Any comments? thanks for the progress that you're continuing to
very
make in this area. Really important.
I appreciate your interest.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so now the motion on the screen that we receive the report, the Chasms August 2024, July 2024 update. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Oops. That's done. Okay, Debbie, thank you for the Risk and Assurance Committee performance report. I'll hand over to you just to highlight anything you'd like to particularly talk about. Great to get all this captured and for us to reflect on the performance and share this more broadly. Over to you.
Thank you. Through the chair, the only points that I want to really highlight in this report is that there is an opportunity to reflect on the performance and also provide further opportunities for committee development and wider discussion in the workshop that's going to be held in October. I think that one of the purposes of this performance review is to set the scene for future committee members as well, so they understand the breadth and scope of the topics covered. And you will see through there, as we've broken down, we've covered a wide range of things over the past since the election started. And I think sometimes they get lost a little bit in the agenda. So actually seeing them in a table and the coverage that we've had, it also indicates to me in the time that I've been with council and certainly being part of this committee, is we have grown that information. We've expanded the knowledge, we've expanded the exposure, and we're looking more closely at that assurance space. So that for me is a really positive outcome from that. So I'm actually going to take this report as read and happy to answer any questions. And thank you for the committee itself, because this is about you. Thank you.
Councillor Michael.
Thank you. I know we talk about risk tolerance a lot, and we're going to talk about it in October. Your thoughts would be risk tolerance would be done in this committee, or would you prefer that to be done in a whole council?
Can you just repeat that again? Because you've actually lost me a little bit on that question. I've probably just,
Which committee would you like, in your view, should be handling risk tolerance?
Risk tolerance has to come from this committee. Firstly, risk tolerance has to be understood by this committee so that when information comes back from other committees, you can actually support them. You're only one small group here. If you don't understand risk tolerance, how is it that your colleagues can understand it?
So we would be discussing and then making recommendations to wider council or alerting wider council. Yep, that's cool. And we've just got a much better opportunity to debate, I think, in this committee more of the issues, and as Debbie said, understand them, and then be able to share that. Just the questionnaire. Thank you. I know committee members did complete a questionnaire. We've started the collation of that and the comments, and appreciate all of that. What we're going to do is to take that forward to the workshop, because there are areas that obviously come out of a questionnaire like that that we want to discuss further and then decide on particular priority actions. So that's where that's at this point. And it'll go through to the October workshop. We will, once we've worked out the actions and that sort of thing, it will go through with our normal agenda papers in the future. Mike, Timmer.
Thank you very much, Debbie, for this report. I'm not sure I'd call it a performance report. I would call it a list of things that we've done during the year. Performance to me is looking at what we planned to do and what we ended up in doing. And while some of that's embedded in here, I think we haven't achieved a few things. For example, the internal audit. We've only managed in here, we've got one audit. I noticed that we've got a couple coming up, etc. The risk appetite statement hasn't, and Michael was just talking about that, I think. It he's talking about tolerance, but the risk appetite statement hasn't been finished. We don't seem to have an action list for this committee. It's pretty common to have action lists of items that need to be done in the future. We did have one for the first 2 or 3 years, and that seems to have dropped off. And the other issue that I wanted to raise, and we did do it today, was that I'm really keen that GMs come and talk about their risks. And what I mean by that is just a brief presentation about the risks in the area, what keeps them up at night, and for me, that it's not so much hearing about the risks; it's more about hearing about how the GMs are dealing with their risks and how their level of ability to cope with, to be able to explain to us, and for me to get confidence in that they're managing risks real well. So what I would like to see is more of them at the committee, but not so much, well, we ask them questions about their risks, but more they would say, well, I've got 10 risks, these are the major ones, this is what's happening in my area. So then I get a feel, yes, you're looking at your risks, you're managing them really well, you know what you're doing, because that's what this committee's about, getting comfort and getting to see that there's compliance happening. So, yeah, those are my brief comments.
Thank you, Mike. And I'm aware of your comments, they're not new to me. So a couple of things. One for me around the ELT presentation and representation around the table. I think we've got to be really clear that we are at the governance level rather than into the management of particular areas and risks. But I think there are ways of doing that to achieve what you are looking for. I know that there is a very active ELT, focus on risk with David's leadership. So just thinking about how we might do that in the future. We also got the opportunity to do deep dives into areas as well if there are particular concerns. So, and I'll also take on board, and we have been, the action items. We either put them on the work program, we decide that they've been done, like the information has been provided, or we have an action list where we make sure that we go back to that after each meeting. But I'm happy to work more with you on that, as we talked about prior to the meeting. Those were your 3 things, yeah.
The other one was the risk appetite statement. And
yes,
the,
absolutely. Yes.
And the internal audit.
Yeah.
While we can probably live without a risk appetite statement, and we're managing quite admirably with it, it's a useful thing to have there.
Yes.
That everybody knows what we're on, that we're all thinking the same thing, and I think that's important. And in terms of internal audit, yeah, it's just disappointing that, I mean, I know there's been some issues, but it's disappointing we haven't done as many as we probably would have liked.
I think when we come back for our program for the next year, which is due, we should talk about, I was sort of interested in how many we would expect to do. Like we were doing a whole lot prior and creating quite a lot of internal work. And then we took the internal audit process externally, which has had some different challenges with it around, consultants to do that work and timing and that sort of thing. So I think when we get our report going forward again, it would be useful to say this is how many we do think we've got capacity for, and just be clear about that going forward. But there was a change this year, I acknowledge that.
Just on that, it'd be quite useful to get a bit of a roadmap going forward about, over say even the next 2 to 3 years, what the audits we're thinking that we're doing, and obviously some risk-based work that you've done around those, which seems to be pretty good. But just to see where we're at, so when you do your compliance reporting, Deb, if you could say, well, here's the plan. They've got these 7 or 8 reports. Scheduled, here's all the dates, we've done them, blah, 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 just so we can be refreshed as to what's coming up and what to expect. That would be really helpful.
So just to respond to that, if you look into the assurance report, which is next on the agenda, there is some detail in there about the internal audit program, the process that we've gone to get to this point, and the future audits that we've actually got. It's also on the work program for the first meeting of the new year, to actually look at what the program will be going forward based on the internal audit charter which we have, which is signed off by this committee, and also the internal audit universe, so that we're not overlapping into the things that are being done by Audit New Zealand or other third parties, and also conscious, as the chair said, of not overwhelming the organisation with audit after audit and not necessarily getting value for money out of that audit. Yep.
Yeah, totally concur with those comments. Yeah, value for money is really important, and that comes back to that risk base, that we're focusing on the right thing. But I still asking to see what I want to regularly see what we've got, what's going forward, because I found it a bit hard to find. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Michael.
Yeah, I don't just want to completely disagree with Mike, but the reason why for timing, for the tolerance and the appetite is really important for me is because we've now implemented EPMO, we're now implementing a new projects committee, and my fear, my risk, is that we become responsive in our risk management, whereas if we set the tone of those attributes, we become proactive with being involved. I guess that's my thought process, and it's probably because I know what the portfolios and the projects committee are coming up with, and I want to be proactive and talk about that risk appetite, tolerance, how we respond to risk, what our risk mitigation strategies are from that tolerance, and those little things. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but I kind of want to get onto it as soon as possible.
Yeah, I totally agree. I want to get on with it
yeah,
as well. But
I think we all do.
I understand where management is with it, but I'm a little impatient that we haven't got it. So we are on the same page.
David.
Look, I think it's important to also maintain a bit of perspective. You do have a risk appetite already defined in our risk management framework. The anchored scoring scale that we use to rate risks is colour-coded, which is a kind of appetite, but also on top of that we set target residual risks levels. So we set an appetite by saying the target is to get this risk down to a low. There's a little bit of enhancement we could do, but the fundamental basics of having a risk appetite it's already there and has been for quite a while. I just think we've maybe not fully recognised it for what it is. So the gap is not as big as hopefully you haven't. Yeah.
Can I respond, Madam Chair? Is that okay? My thought process, you're not incorrect, but this committee, which has a new governance structure, from a governance point of view, we haven't come up with that risk appetite. And as you guys know, I'm far more risky than your risk appetite is currently. So I would like to drive more risk into our projects so that Andrew can lead a more riskier appetite-y thingy.
Yeah. Look, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah. Through you, Madam Chair. Effectively, the enhancement that I alluded to is bringing it back to this committee so that you can define the appetite, because at the moment it's largely been management set, and it's been done risk by risk, where we have that anchored scoring scale, and it's split by the risk types, whether they're reputational risks, financial risks. Against each of those, I think there should be a consistent, for financial risks, our appetite is low. For other risk categories, you may be more willing to be a medium or a high. But the enhancement is that consistency of a structured approach, and for it to be set by the governance team rather than the management team. But the actual mechanics, they're all there and they're being used at the moment.
So we will see that in October. That's what we're aiming for. Yeah. Mayor Andrew.
Yeah, I feel like I need to respond to that because I actually agree with my colleague, Councillor Michael, on this, that in it's probably worthwhile picking up this discussion offline, I think, to bring particularly some of our other committees into this. I'm thinking particularly the CCO and ED committee, but other councillors in regard to, I don't know how we progress this, but some kind of workshop to understand how we manage our risk, and we differentiate it depending on what the opportunities are and what the what the risk appetite is for different parts of council's business.
Agree, and we should. I thought we could have a straw man for October, if that's the right terminology, like something that we would put on the table that we could then explore further and then add to or whatever. But even a starting point, I think, would be useful. Yeah, so that's what we're planning for October. Okay, thank you. Just if no other questions or comments on the performance report, I'll move in a second for the motion up there. Thank you, Mayor and Michael, seconded. And just to formally put the motion now, Risk and Assurance Committee received the report, the Risk and Assurance Performance Report 2022 to 2024. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Debbie, we can take your assurance activity report, I think, as read. But if there's any particular item you just wish to highlight, please do so.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm happy to take the report as read and answer any questions as necessary. Thank you.
Any questions on the activity report? No? That's great. Nice report, thank you. It's good. It keeps us up to date. Oh, I did have one question. It's probably for Catherine. You know that protected disclosure. Sorry, I'm on page 69 under the policy assurance overview. We've now got an incident response, an independent provider engaged, implementation commencing in July 2024. So has the policy been updated?
The last time I spoke to this, it was underway to be completed and have that put in place. So I've ensuring that that is done. The next audit and risk and assurance committee was I think the agreement with that one there.
Right. Yeah. So we've got a consultant, we've got somebody, an independent provider, and they are updating they're redoing the protected disclosure paper, the policy.
So I've had a conversation with them, so they've helped draft that with aspects of the legal changes that we've had to ensure that that works, but also in regards to how staff engage with a whistleblowing incident, for example, and that is managed in a confidential way, and it's not managed internally, it's managed by them, so that it gives that independence in that process.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Thanks, Catherine. Okay, so the motion is that we receive the assurance activity summary, August 2024. I'll move it. Anyone to second? Thank you, Josh. All those in favour? Anyone against? Carried. That's cool. Okay. Now we're moving to the payroll audit and remediation process paper. We welcome Kirsty to the table, and Catherine. Hi, Kirsty. Okay. I'll pass over to you. Anything you just wish to highlight, you can expect that we have read the report. Thank you. And we'll ask questions if we need to after you've spoken. Thank you.
Thank you. So, as you're aware, the New Zealand Payroll Practitioners Association have conducted an audit, and it has identified for some staff that our payroll system has been calculating leave payments and their accruals incorrectly, and we're working towards remediating those issues and ensuring there's no reoccurrence of them. Obviously, it's not a situation we wanted to find ourselves in, but it is one that many organisations, particularly those with staff that have working arrangements that are outside the standard Monday to Friday 8 to 5 type arrangement are having to deal with. I was very hopeful that we would receive an indication of the potential financial exposure that we could bring to this meeting. Unfortunately, we're not quite in that position. We're expecting to receive it now by the end of August. The reason for that is that the process of running remediations involves running scripts which have to be adapted to fit organisations' circumstances, including different allowance codes and arrangements. So that's taken a little bit longer than we had anticipated. But once we have that information, we will absolutely share that with you. What we do know is that most of the areas reflect relatively small and well-defined groups of staff. So we don't expect the quantum to be as large as that other organisations have seen. And we are still expecting to complete the remediation for all of our current and the vast majority of our former employees by the end of the year. Other than that, I'm happy to take the report as read and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councillor Michael.
Just a question on the level of exposure for GasNet. It mentions here we do payroll for GasNet. Is it big for them or small?
Again, because they're using the same system as us, the errors are affecting staff in those same groups of or those same situations. But again, we don't have an indication of the quantum because they're still working through that script as well.
I guess from a high level point of view, would they have more of those type of people than us, based on the nature or not? No. Okay.
I'm not in a position to comment. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Mike Timmer.
I've got a question. It's a more general one, really, and it relates back to the work we did this morning. We talked about this morning, or earlier on this afternoon, rather, about our new system that we're implementing for vertical assets. And I look at this paper and it says that we have an asset that's 20 years old and it's struggling and blah, blah, blah. I just wonder how we let something get so old and not replace it. And I know payroll systems are difficult, and I know what we're experiencing here is not uncommon. All the councils and the health boards and everyone seems to have this problem, and it's probably more a function of the complex legislation that the systems are trying to achieve and or trying to emulate and do it right. So it's just one of those things that happens. But we have got an old system, and have we got other old assets that are likely that we should be replacing on a more regular basis? So based on that, and I don't want to cause management a whole lot of work, but it would be good to understand all the different systems that we've got and where we're at with everything, and are we getting good information so we can, with our asset management plans and our CapEx going forward. And is this the right forum for it? The answer to that might be wrong, might be no.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer that in regards to the ICT space, so information technology. That's something that we are looking at through the cost savings efficiencies that we're looking at the moment in regards to what kind of systems that we have got. We've got double-upper systems. Are they actually outdated? Do we actually need them? So that team is actually looking right across the board, across the organisation in regards to those types of things. We also have to be mindful that where we may remove something, we need to check that we're not taking away something that's going to create other roll-on problems as well. In regards to the payroll situation, we are looking at a new system that will help remedy that. But as Kirsty has described and through her report, it's ensuring that we have that cleansed data before we take on a new system, because we don't want to carry forward current issues that we've got as well.
Thank you. David?
Look, through you, Madam Chair, just to add to what Catherine's outlined there, I think, Mike, you made the point that our core systems, our ERP, payroll systems, those things that are critical to running the organisation are assets. And part of the asset management project will be to go beyond our public assets, but also look at our corporate assets, fleet, IT hardware, software systems, so that we're proactively planning for their maintenance, their replacement, and monitoring the obsolescence risk. Because as you say, a new Holiday Act comes in and makes our system obsolete because it broke it. And that should have been something that we, as an organisation, responded to quicker than we have, rather than continuing in limp mode to trying to make the old system work. We're in a better position now because we've actually got a budget. We're actively planning on that system's replacement. But going forward, we need to be on guard for similar kind of things happening with any of our other core systems that keep the organisation functioning.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, so I'll put the motion that we receive the report, payroll, audit and remediation process, August 2024. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Peter. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you. And we look forward to continued sort of updates once you get more information. That would be great. Thank you. Okay, Debbie, just the Risk and Assurance Committee work programme. And this is really where we put anything that anybody thinks we should be looking at coming up over the next few meetings. So if you have ideas or you think we're missing something, this is an important sort of plan forward for us. Debbie, just over to you, please.
Thank you. I'm just going to take the report as read and happy to answer any questions. Just to reiterate, as the Chair noted, this is a dynamic program. It is fed by the committee and also as things change throughout the year and we pop things in there. So again, happy to take it as read and answer any questions. Thank you.
Anybody got any questions? Oh, Councillor Jenny.
Great work program. Happy to move.
Thank you. Anyone would second? Thank you, Josh. Or I'll put the motion, receive the report, the work program for 2024. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? That's carried then. Thank you. So that's our whole agenda for today. It was a lot fuller. We tried to keep enough space for good discussion. And I think we had that particularly in the first two items and a bit more on strategic risk this time. So I think that's been really useful. And I'd just like to ask Jenny to read the closing karakia.
Thank you. E oha ki ronga ki a Ranganui. E oha ki raro ki a Papatua Nuku. Pakatairanga, te kupu, te kōrero, te mahi ki te pau o te wari. He tonga, he mahi a muri. Ka puta ki te wai ao, ki te ao marama. Humie, huie, tai kie.